Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty oranges in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd and product guy, joined by Juan Sequeda.
Hey, Tim. Well, today is our final episode of the
It's
season.
the finale.
It's a finale just for the season.
Just for the season,
we're
yeah.
gonna-
Not forever, just for the
We're going
season.
to keep going because why not?
Yeah, we're just going to do podcasts for the next 30 years. It'll be fun.
Well, it has been now close to 5, or it is
Yeah.
4.5. I don't know.
Five?
Well, sorry.
Yeah, 4.5, something like that. Yeah.
But we're going to do our takeaways of the takeaways, and in the meantime, we are in our office, which we rarely are, and
Yeah.
Tim's actually making the cocktails right now.
We're making some cocktails over here. It's the holidays. We love old fashions. That's kind of our go-to cocktail. But for the holidays, we actually heard a story from our coworker yesterday, Dean Alamang, and Dean was telling us about how his husband had created these gin old fashions, and how it was just a game changer because he loves old fashions, and who knew that gin old fashions could taste so good?
And
So
they
we're
taste
gonna
like
try it
Christmas.
out. Yeah, it tastes like Christmas, evidently. It tastes like the holidays.
All right. Well, that's what we're doing, and I think in the meantime, we're going to go through all our the takeaways of the takeaways and go through all our guests. And I just want to kind of really, first of all, just huge, gigantic thank you to all the amazing people who have been on our podcast this season. And I'm just kind of the quick list of folks. So Anna Bergevin talking about data products. We had Tian Kai Fen talking about his book, Humanizing Data Strategy. Don Carter about building diversity in data. Amalia Child about the 5 laws of data enablement. Mariam Halfide about responsible AI. Dale Williamson about why we need data and AI needs to embrace interoperability. Kevin Hu about data quality, Mike Evans on active metadata, Colleen Tartow about streamlining data value, Andrea Gioia about knowledge management, Malcolm Hawker on the future of data catalogs, Vinod Shandar about the open table formats, Ethan Mullick about AI, Nicola Ashcom about data governance, Ole Olson about the metagrid, and we had last week we were at the
Live from
DGIQ, more
DGIQ.
governance. So that has been like we have 15 guests this season. I think over we need to make the count. I think over 200, probably now 250 episodes. So
Yeah, and I think this was our best season yet.
yeah, totally. And here's the really amazing thing is that we have the Spotify wrapped up came out, and we'll publish some information around that stuff. But what I found was, I think I have the numbers over there.
Yeah.
So there a huge shout out to all our fans. But if I go back, this is amazing. We are in the top 10 podcasts for 811 people. We are in the top 5 podcasts for 504 people. And we are the number 1 podcast for 132 people. Like,
Yeah. That's crazy.
I can't believe that. And
So there are
all those-
there's 132 people who like us more than Joe Rogan.
wow. Okay, I never thought about that one.
Well, thank you everyone who listens to us regularly on a one-off basis. We love you, we appreciate you, and we do this because we wanna share with you the awesome people that we get to meet and the awesome things that they know, and we learn too. We go through these and we're learning too, and so just thank you so much. And we look forward to many more seasons of great episodes as we go forward.
And meeting people at conferences.
Yep.
So we're next year we're making our list. So we'll be traveling around a lot in the U.S. and in
Yep.
Europe. So looking forward to meeting a lot of people. So
Mhm.
Tim, cheers to 8 seasons.
To
Here
8
we go.
seasons.
All right,
Does this taste okay?
it does taste like Christmas.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
bad, right? Using some antique gin. I have antique gin at home, and I don't know what to
There you
use it for.
Here we are.
I'll use it for antique old fashions.
All right, let's go down the list. Let's go talk about every single guest that we've had,
Yeah.
and let's go back and forth. You kick us off.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So one of our the first episode of this season was with Anna Bergevin, right? And it was around data product management. And that's a really hot topic right now in the data circles, right? Because everyone's trying to figure out how to make managing data a lot more scalable, apply some of the best practices of things like software product management to the data world for governance, for discoverability, for things connected to things like data mesh and data fabric. And I think what was really great about what Anna talked about is she is a data product manager, right? And she hadn't always been a data product manager. She has moved into that as a focus as her career, and was really able to get us a little bit into the mindset of how you get into that, how you do it well. I think one thing that was really important is that she approached it with a lot of humility. I remember one key takeaway was she said that, do we have it all figured out for data product management? And she said, no. There's no book for this. There are not many good resources. Interestingly, that's changing very quickly, and a couple of our guests are actually writing some books on data product management. But
by the way, note that this episode was in August, and
Mhm.
Andrea published his book just I think it came out last week or something. So
Yes.
it's moving fast.
Yeah, things are moving fast. Yeah, so we'll get to Andrea in a minute, but data product management is very new, right? And there are some differences, right? Data product management and software product management are not exactly the same, and so that's important. I think one of the things that it was interesting is we asked her kind of like, is it better to be a product person who kind of learns data, or is it better to be a data person who learns product? And she said that I really think that you need to be more a product person by process and approach, which means you really need to listen. You need to make sure you're not jumping straight into the solution. You have to have empathy. You need to talk to your users. You need to discover, right? And so, she really put some really big importance on that product kind of background and how valuable that can be. But she said you can learn it, right? You can learn all these things. She said that you don't have a specific engineering manager that you can work with when you're a data product manager, so it makes things a little bit different. A data PM isn't necessarily tightly coupled to engineering and design, so that's
I
something
wonder how
got
much that will
used to.
change over time.
I would love to
Let's
see
say,
that change, like coming from the product management side in software, right? The ability to like have a design and engineering counterpart you work closely with is so valuable. I wonder if soon we'll have sort of like the new triad, the data triad, which is like a data designer, a data engineer, which we already have, and now a data product manager. Right. So she said that some of the trickiest problems in data product management are the context living in people's heads. How do we tap into that, right? You got to go out there. You got to talk to people. You got to understand the problems they're facing. You got to really create a value system, right? You need to make documentation easy. You got to create incentives for people to share their knowledge. And then lastly, one thing that I thought was really great that she noted is she said data quality is something that you have to talk about all the time. And it's a journey, right? It's not a destination, it's a journey. And she said, data quality, do we go back and rewrite history as if it never happened?
That's a t-shirt quote right there. Remember, so data products, I think is one of those things, right? That came out of data mesh a couple of years ago. We talked about it, and that's kind of been the topic that has survived this test of time.
Yeah,
and I really expect this to be growing more and more.
Yep.
So looking forward to a lot of more of that conversation. Next
Agreed.
year.
I think there's a lot more to unpack there, including reading some of these new books that are coming out and digesting them.
All right, next guest we had was Tian Kai Fen on humanizing data strategy, and
he wrote a book.
He also wrote a book, and his C's. I want to go through them quickly. Competency, right? We need to get that foundation to get the others to go work. And a lot about part of this competency is that we need to wear different hats. We need to wear that detective hat, right, to find the root causes of things. We need to be the negotiator to go align, right? We need to be the therapist so we can empathize and gain trust. And I like this notion of having different hats. When it comes to collaboration, I think his proposal is about co-creation, right? Because there's always going to be like this mismatch of expectations. People want more. They want more service, but some people want more self-service. Like we need to understand that. And then let's make sure we're co-creating, have clear contributions, that we're achieving that success together, right? So we need to really kind of shape those objectives that we have. And for example, let's talk about humanizing. I think one of the things about when it comes to collaboration is like, if we consider it more like a ticket system, like that, you're replacing the human, you're dehumanizing in that case, right? This is where you want to have that communication, collaboration happening with folks, which is actually, let's go talk to the person. I'll just see this whole relationship as like a ticket system and just through comments. Communication, right? Data people are being misunderstood by the businesses, right? There's all this miscommunication happening around there. And communication starts with understanding the audience. And without that, we won't be able to understand their personal interests. So I think that's really, really the key thing is understanding people's interests, personal interests, and that's understanding their motivations or incentives. Creativity. So strategy should encourage to be creative. And and Tanka is a musician, and he has his music and data analogy. Music is very defined by rules, but there is so much art in how you mix and match that. And I think that was such a very beautiful statement.
Agreed.
And then unconscious, we talked about an active versus passive optimism, and we should be active. We should treat active optimism, which is contribute to the best possible outcome. At the end of the day, we can't afford for the human to be out of the loop. That was get his book, and I think there's so much reading to be done.
Yeah, you got to read these books. And his 5 C's were conscience, creativity, competency. So competency, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. So those I think are a really great framework for thinking about data strategy.
All right, number 3.
So we chatted with the awesome Dawn Carter about building diversity in data. And Dawn Carter may be one of my favorite people in the world. She's just so energetic and enthusiastic and empathetic, and she cares so much about diversity. And she has, in her own organization, really established a strong diversity. I very distinctly remember her talking about how her data architecture team is 50% female. And that is pretty unusual. I've worked at a lot of companies. I've seen a lot of data architecture teams. No offense to data architecture people, but you tend to be a little older, whiter hair, and usually a man, right? And that's awesome. And she really has set this foundation for how to drive diversity. And the core principle behind it, which I think is really great, and we all need to really take this to heart as leaders and as peers of great data people, is diversity in data. What does it mean? We need more diversity, not because it's nice or you're supposed to. It's because diverse thoughts mean we are looking at things from different viewpoints, so we get to the better answer ultimately.
Yep. If you put a diverse group of people in a room versus a very homogeneous group, I think the diverse group,
the results will be better. Yep. So that's, I think, really great. And in addition to really talking about like driving diversity, being a leader, being willing to mobilize, right? Don't just be a participant, be a mobilizer of diversity within your organization. She really talked a lot about change management as well, because change and driving change is really important to driving not just diversity, but any kind of impact within your organization. And she said, I try to face every problem with the same question: how hard can it be? Right. And that's not a statement. She made it very clear. That's not a statement of ignorance. It's a statement of determination. Right. I'll find a way to get there. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It may be hard and I may need to make sacrifices, but sometimes it's easy. So you got to try. Ask the what if questions. Ask questions that people may fear to ask because they think it's dumb. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, right? And we kind of really finished off with that statement, be more Dawn, which I guess some of her friends have been joking with her with, some of her coworkers. And what does it mean to be more Dawn? It means be a professional feather ruffler. Oh. So be a little more bold. So shout out to you, Dawn. Appreciate you.
All right, then we had Amalia Child. She wrote a blog post on Locally Optimistic about the 5 laws of data enablement. So what the father of library science would make, how the father of library science would make his data teams indispensable. So there's the 5 laws of library science. This is a fantastic blog post to help bridge with the whole area of library sciences that many, us included, like from the data world, like we don't understand that. That's not our world. But when you learn about this, you're like, wow, there's like so many obvious things after you learn this. So the 5 laws: 1, books are for use, which means that, hey, if it wasn't obvious at that time, but you have libraries, right? You should locate them centrally so people can get there. It's not an ivory tower. You want to have it very comfortable furniture so people can come in and feel cozy. They want to have staff should be people who are welcoming, enthusiastic.
Should be a place you want to be. Right?
Place you want to be. And the people who are in the libraries who manage them, they want to know. They should get to know their patrons, right? So did they just come out of some high pressure meeting? Is there something that they're not achieving? Like, books are for you. So you really want to make sure that this is accessible to everybody. Number 2, everybody, their data set. So you really want to make sure that it's like I don't want to just dump a bunch of books or data and let people have at it, right? That's a kind of enablement and governance that we need to have. We also talk about like hub and spoke models. Like that's what libraries have always been doing. We have a central library. We have branches. Like, hey, libraries have been doing data mesh for 400 years now, right? You want to have probably some of the same books in different libraries, but not always, right? The third law is every book its reader, every data set its stakeholder. So you want to have education and marketing and outreach practices around this. Not everyone is going to know what to get out of the data. And it's sometimes you also need to have weeding, right? It's time to archive. That's just part of the process, right? Librarians are not trying to be hoarders. They're being very strategic of what they keep and what they don't keep. You should also be very proactive with your community and your stakeholders, saying, "Hey, I know that you were looking for this thing, and you know what? We found more information about that. Let me get back. Let's get back. We're getting back to you for that." The fourth law is save time of the stakeholder, the reader. We have technology. People want things quickly. We need to have self-service. So that's why you have self-checkouts, right? You have ebooks and stuff so you can get stuff faster. You have innovative signs to be able to go find things. But also at some point, right, you may hit the limits of self-service. So you want to have that team of the data team librarians who can help you. And the final law is that if you're following those first four laws, your function will grow and it will be exciting and it will be daunting. It means that you're having more problems because you're now becoming more important and you're going to have issues at scale, and that's actually a good thing. So there is so much to learn about library sciences. I'm really appreciated to be able. This is one episode I go back to a lot, and I'm telling people like, there's a lot to learn from library sciences. So
yeah. I think if you haven't read her article, it's really inspiring, and the analogy is so strong between library science and what we're trying to do with data.
100%.
Next episode, so episode number 5 this season was with Miriam Halfhide of Zebia Data around responsible AI. And, this is a topic I think is coming up in a lot of circles about, okay, we're doing things around AI. It's not just about productivity and impact in the organization. It brings up ethical questions. It brings up responsibility questions. And, we started off with what is responsibility and what is responsible AI. Ethics, she said, is very broad, right? And ethics is kind of, very contextual to the time. And, it's kind of like, what is the moral framework for anything kind of broadly speaking? Responsibility, she felt, was a better word than ethical AI, that responsible AI makes more sense to talk about because, everyone has their moral compass, but responsible AI is really more about your own actions and what you're contributing to it, right? It really says that we have an accountability, and that's important. We need to think about what our actions and our decisions are that we take responsibility for. Responsible AI in this new field, right? And so I thought that was a valuable to think about how these words compare to each other and what it means to have responsible AI. Who is responsible when it comes to AI? Well, it's the team, but it's not just the developers. It's multidisciplinary, right? But a team that is developing AI needs to take responsibility around that AI. They can't just throw that responsibility over the fence or just say, well, legal is in charge of worrying about if we use this incorrectly and things like that. We all have to take responsibility for the own projects that we build. So there's a personal and team accountability around that. I think one thing we talked about was the EU AI Act. Obviously, that's a key piece of legislation that has been enacted in Europe. And it is something that is being keenly looked at to see, is it going to be effective? Is it actually enforceable? And also other countries and other groups, like, what are they going to implement? Are they going to kind of copy that? Are they going to do something different, right? In the US, you've got a few different places where laws are starting to get discussed around this. But she said that regulation is the lowest bar for ethical behavior. Any lower, and you're literally punished by the law. So if that's your bar of what your responsibility is, my responsibility is just to stay out of jail. That's a pretty low bar, right? And you should be really thinking about how you can do better than that, right? Or fined, right? Not always jail, fined, right? But still, some of these fines are pretty hefty. But you really need to be thinking about how we can do more than that. One other thing she really talked about was this idea of privacy by design, governance by design, responsibility by design, right? So thinking about whenever we approach these AI projects, how do we come at it from the beginning, keeping in mind what are the responsibility principles that we care about? This shared thing is what she called conscious consideration. So how do we build a principle and a culture of conscious consideration within our organization? So I think that's a really important consideration.
So our next episode was with Dale Williamson, who's the EMEA CTO of Databricks, on why data and AI needs to embrace interoperability. So he said, like, why do we even do ETL? It's because of the lack of interoperability. And for me, the key takeaway from this episode, which I bring it up a lot, talking to customers and prospects and just a lot of folks in the data industry, is that we look at this as a stack where at the bottom of the stack, it's really all about data and technology. And at that bottom stack, we've been really great at doing that standardizations all the way from like operating systems like Linux and stuff like that. You go up, we have standards like SQL, things like you stay in that bottom tech stack, right? And it's in the very data. It's very quantifiable. You can measure things. And that's why you have all these table formats and stuff. Like the different standards come around there, but you can actually do those standardizations on that.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that when you start going up the stack, it starts turning more into people. So it's like you have data and technology at the bottom. When you go up the stack, you have knowledge and people, and that's when it becomes super complicated because, hey, people are complicated. You have to deal with the whole politics and stuff. So I think that's why we have all these standardizations. We can interoperate at the very lower technical level, but once we go up, you have these semantics that are needing to go bridge like that, the different people. That's where it gets hard. And I think his solution is that we don't need to solve the context. We need the rules that govern the context. And an analogy around here is like how we build the websites or the web. Like there is like no rule of what a website needs to have.
Mm-hmm.
There is just a language, a markup language. I mean, HTML is what you do, and like that's your rules. You can do whatever you want with that. And so I think that's the type of like the framework we need to do. So we don't need to solve for the context. We need to have rules that govern the context. This is one of those episodes where you can listen over and over again and just get a lot of just really brilliant insight. And Dale, very lucky that Dale and I really hit it off, and we just meet every couple of weeks. We just chat. Our 30-minute chat turns into an hour and a half. So it's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
I highly recommend this. All our episodes are fantastic, but this is one that has that really, for me, that nugget of that stack.
Couldn't agree more. Next episode, episode number 7 this season was data quality, the key to Gen AI success with Kevin Hugh, Metaplane. And, a topic that's been coming up a lot recently is like AI readiness, right? How do I get my data ready for AI? And a closely associated topic is data quality, right? We have to have sufficient data quality to leverage with our AI or to train our AI or whatever it might be, right? And so we started with the honest, no BS question. Data quality has always been a focus. Gen AI is bringing it more to the forefront. Is there something different now? And he said, in one sentence, Gen AI requires trusted data, which kind of makes sense, right? And so, we've been talking about for decades all these things like decision support, BI, statistics, ML, but really, Gen AI needs to kind of change things a little bit because it's non-deterministic. It's unstructured. And so it's kind of changing the way that we're thinking about things. What does quality mean in that context? And he really pushed that, like, if you don't get involved in the Gen AI projects and really try to make sure that they're focusing on high quality, it's going to happen anyways, right? It's going to, like, things are going to happen with or without you. So find a way to get involved in those things. Try to encourage how these things can be more well-governed, have higher quality, be more tightly coupled to the best data in the organization. Because if you don't, these things are just going to happen anyway. So make sure you get involved so you can be aware of how it's tapping into the right data or how data needs to evolve to help it better. He said for data quality, any lapse between the state of data of where it is and where it needs to be is the issue around data quality. So I thought that was interesting. It was a very broad definition of data quality. Wow. Of like, is it fit for purpose? If it's not fit for purpose, then it's low quality.
Yeah.
Some aspects of data quality can apply to Gen AI, like validation tests that the system's working end to end. But there are some new challenges that aren't previously addressed in kind of traditional ways of doing data quality. For example, chunking. Like, what does it mean to have quality around chunking, right? What does it mean to do anomaly detection on vector embeddings? We don't know. We haven't defined those things yet.
What is data quality on unstructured data? First of all,
Right.
Unstructured data quality.
Right, exactly. Does somebody need to go around flagging like which documents it's okay
and even in that, like inside of the chunking of that stuff you're doing, right? So yeah, this is all open territory.
Yeah, so this is new, right? We're all figuring this out together. So, would you let a customer query and access this data? If the answer is no, then why would you let an LLM do it, especially without a human in the loop? So there's some interesting questions here, some that are addressed by traditional quality, some that are not. He talked about a bear case and a bull case around how Gen AI and data quality are going to be integrated. The bear case, the bad case, right, is that companies are going to do this no matter what. So we just have to ensure that we help the kids learn how to tie their shoes. And yes, they're going to fall down. That's okay, but we're here to support them as they go. And if they cry, we can put a Band-Aid on their knee, right? He said the bull case, right, the biggest upside is that the data team can become the conduit for the entire Gen AI conversation and let the elephant go bite by bite. So I think that's interesting. Is it basically saying that like even if it's the worst possible scenario, like that's okay. We have an important role. Data quality has a very important role. He said that the dialogue between the machine learning community and the data community is pretty siloed.
Yeah. Completely. I was at the MLOps conference a couple weeks ago. And you can see it was very
like even we were at the DGIQ conference last week, right? And we were talking to Malcolm and Scott and a few others, right? And we were talking about like, we're talking here about like AI ready data and data quality and things like that, and like ML ops and things like that, right? But like they're also talking about it in these other conferences, and they're talking about it in a different way, and they're using different words, and they're talking about different software to help you. And so there's these two, probably more than two conversations need to merge together and find the common ground, right? He said, who's in charge of data quality for Gen AI? And then he said, why do doctors have bad handwriting? It's because they never have to read their own handwriting. Only other people have to read it, right? So the issue is the input data. The business has to get their house in order. Otherwise, LLMs are going to try to read that data, and they're not going to be able to read the handwriting, right? Salesforce admins should also have to do input validation. So it's also those upstream systems too. I think that's a theme that we've heard anytime we've talked with people about data quality, is that sometimes we think about like data quality in the context of things like your data pipeline or your data warehouse. But actually, some of the most important data quality happens in the source systems. And do you know who's in charge of data quality in that situation? It's the salesperson filling out the Salesforce entry, right? How do we enforce data quality with them? So these are very interesting questions.
And it goes back to other topics we'll have about governance and stuff. I think this is kind of like all coming together in a way. Like we're not talking about shift left, and we're talking about data contracts and all that stuff. Like, and guess what? Where does this all go back to? To people at the end, and like, how do we incentivize it? How do we govern them? Like this all of this
comes
stuff
back to people.
Next one was the untapped value of metadata with Mike Evans from Amplify. And so we're talking about metadata. Look, organizations create metadata all the time, right? There's definitions, entities, the data about the data and so forth. But one thing is that we're capturing it. The other thing is, are you actually doing something with it? So then we come up with the term active metadata, which the honest, no BS, is that this is such a blah, blah, blah term. And this person will be left unnamed, but I heard that if metadata were a person, they would sue others for discrimination, because how can metadata is active? Metadata is metadata, right? So, but anyways, if we're talking about active metadata, the honest no BS definition is it's just analytics of your metadata. That's it. You're using the same kind of analytics techniques that we use for data, but you're doing with metadata to make real improvements on the way we operate with that. So when you use metadata in this way, it can tell you if you're creating, like, for example, if you're creating these reports, is this work actually being used or not, and so forth. So I think there's a lot of things that we should be analyzing this metadata to help us then go drive some particular patterns. So low-hanging fruit of things you can go do, like, let's say you're going to reduce the spend on dashboard development, or so you can focus on some high value areas, or like, that there's all this data being pushed somewhere but nobody's being using it. You're spending all this money on storage and also on compute to transform the data, but nobody's using that type of stuff, right? That is a low hanging fruit thing to be able to go do things, analyze the metadata to learn that. Look, you're getting a bunch of complaints to surface all those data issues to accelerate the time to resolve those issues, right? So just start the places where that you have some challenges around that. So I think that is like the kind of the obvious thing to go do that we're not thinking about, and it's just right there in front of us, this active metadata. Now, predicts that metadata, all this active metadata, it's going to be the big topic coming up next year. I think with together with data products, because at the end of the day, like people are going to push out these data products to a marketplace. People are going to be keeping track. Are they using it? The usage of that stuff, and they want to make sure these data products are being generated and they're keeping up to date. Like all that, I think the data product is helping people focus on the usage of it, and the metadata is going to help us make sure that we're providing better and better products and improve and learn from that stuff. So I suspect that we're going to be talking a lot more about this metadata and active metadata.
Metadata is the key to everything, and how do we make it as automated and as impactful as possible?
Oh, and one more thing that's interesting is that it really insightful is to think about is that when you're evaluating some other tools, also ask the vendors how they're exposing their metadata. Because even though at that moment you're bringing in a tool to go solve problem X, you never know how later on you want to be able to connect that tool with something else, and you want to be able to extract that metadata. So that's actually a good insight to ask those vendors, like, how do you expose your metadata, and how do you expose how it's interacting with other things? So that's an interesting good point. Mm-hmm. All right, we're halfway through.
All right, ready? Next, we talked with Colleen Tartow from Vast Data, and we talked about streamlining data value. And there were some really great nuggets that came from Colleen, really great conversation together. When we're talking about streamlining data value, one of the big things that she said is you have to focus on the end value. What is the question you are trying to answer? And she really focused on simplify. And she kind of mentioned that, especially with the modern data stack movement and like with some of these open source movements and things like that, like there are some parts of this market where we're getting a little too obsessed with like composability and complexity. And like, I have to have 10 different pieces, right? Like, just find ways to simplify your data stack, right? You don't necessarily have to start complicated from the beginning. She said, really shorten the path to going from technology to solving the problem. She said that when it comes to AI, everyone thinks about, I want a chatbot, right? That was one thing. It's like, this is the go-to thing. She said that another go-to is thinking about like, I want to like generate SQL using natural language, right? But she said that just think about like, let's take chatbots out of the equation for a second. SQL was never the blocker to success, right? If we didn't have enough SQL analysts was the reason why we weren't achieving data value, we would have a much easier problem. That's not the problem. So she said, like, we really have to force thinking about what is the use case and really try to force creativity. There's a dearth of creativity, even within the AI community, right? There's too much of an obsession about things like, how do I craft a better email? Instead of how can we use this to make our product or our service better. So she expressed some hope, though, because, data science, when it first started, was kind of, all over the place, but now it's really consolidated around some more key techniques. She really thought that Gen AI would do something different, do something similar. She also said that AI, we got to be thinking not just on how it's going to be fully autonomous, right? The most important value that AI is going to play in the short to medium term is really more around decision support, right? It's going to help us to do more critical thinking. And we've already said it a few times today in our recap. It's a theme this season. She said it's all about the people. The people are the problem, and also the people are going to make this work. Right. So the people are the problem and the people are the solution, and the people provide the context. So people are the key. Right. And really, we have to remember the people aspect about everything. Without context, data engineers are building pipelines to nowhere. It has to drive revenue. And, Juan's big takeaway is you have to streamline data value through creativity. So. Next episode.
All right. Well, next is with Andrea Gioia on knowledge management. And a shout out to Andrea, who just published his book. So why should we be focusing on knowledge management now? It says becoming a learning organization is critical. So consider how many meetings do we go every day just to synchronize our mental models. hey, so I just want to meet to make sure that we're on the same page. And did I get what you mean? Like, oh, this is actually what I meant. Like, we spend so much time in these meetings all the time just so we can synchronize our mental models. Like, we should be able to go formalize this. So, and we should also think about it as creating the model of the problem that we want to discuss and make that explicit, because if we understand that problem first, then we'll be able to go solve that. And what's fascinating is that Andrea comes from the data world. And this is what I've really connected really well with him, is because he comes from the data world and I come more from the knowledge, kind of the semantic world. And we've met in the middle here, because he's comes from the data world, saying, oh, we're going to go build data products, right? And he started with all the data mesh and building data products. And he started building the platform to build the data products, and they're out there and then they're not being used. Like, why aren't they being used? So I mean, people are like, they're going to making copies of the data and so forth. And why is it? Because they're not understanding it. And it's that lack of knowledge. So another interesting point that he brings up is that businesses they continue to live in the last millennia, is what he says, right? They're optimizing their activity in their department, not for the general, for the sense of the entire system of the organization. So there's a lack of incentive to collaborate in the system, in the organization. So I think that is kind of something that we need to unlock. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of keep siloed. I mean, that's what we continue seeing, silos all the time. And it's not just about having some cross-functional team. We also need to have some cross-functional knowledge. We need to understand more of the business, the economics. Data management is not a data problem. It's a problem of people, strategy, systems thinking, economics, incentives. So it's like, in reality, I think this is an opportunity for data leaders to really be these T-shaped. And I think like the aha moment, like the ideal scenario is that you have a new business case coming along, and we realize that we don't need to redo all this work or build another data pipeline. You basically have an existing data product or whatever, and like, it satisfies all my needs. I'm done. Or satisfies 80%. I have almost all the ingredients. So it really should be about not just using, but it should be about reusing. And that's what we should really be focusing on. And there's all these acknowledgments of like investing in knowledge and semantics. This isn't just about saving money, but it's about really moving faster. Yeah, you're actually moving a little bit slower in the immediate term, but it's faster very soon in the short term. So ultimately, it's not only saving money, but it's really improving efficiency and improving innovation. So also, I think little known fact, this is, I think, the most popular episode this season right now.
Yeah, and check out his book.
Yeah, definitely. All right, next one.
Next, we chatted in episode 11 with Malcolm Hawker of Prophecy. Malcolm, always a great person to chat with, whether on camera or not. And our topic was around, what is the future of data catalogs? He wrote a really great LinkedIn post where he went into some detail about like what's going wrong in the world of catalog and where it needs to go. We started off by talking about what's the future of what a data catalog should be. And he said that a data catalog should bridge the gap between data and knowledge management. It should drive business value. It should go from data lineage to business process lineage. Is there a contract that was executed? Was a product shipped? What business processes have been enabled because of this data? How often has it been used? Is it associated with a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome? It starts to look like analytics, but it needs to be the connective tissue. What is driving the issue? So this is very interesting. It's kind of this active metadata concept, the brain of the organization, right? And we talked about, but what's the path we're on? What's the bear case? He said, well, the bear case is it's commoditized. It's sort of just librarian-centric, right? Basic lineage, basic glossary, basic governance, and doesn't progress more than that, right? And this is sort of the dystopian view, which is that catalogs are just going to become, what's the cheapest thing with the most basic features that maybe comes with the platform you're already buying, right? This is sort of the boring future of catalogs. And we said, what is the opportunity? What are the limitations? Are LLMs, for example, a parlor trick? Right? Or is it the future? And he said, it's the future, right? It looks and it talks like us, right? It is the human interface that can draw our engagement and the impact around data. And it will be part of next generation computing. Also, he said unstructured data is really important. How is that going to tie in? And use cases are critical. How can I cross-sell more, right? Is the kind of question that you want to be able to ask your catalog, and it should enable that. And this is really part of what he called a fabric-enabled future, right? Data management isn't going to go away in the next 5 years, though. We are going to be able to automate a lot of data management tasks. And so the shift is going to start to happen. We're going to start to move up the stack, was kind of a part of the conversation, from sort of this more data observability realm where we live today to more like business observability. Right. So I think that's an interesting thing to watch. How can we move to more of this business observability future? The future in the medium term gets closer to knowledge management, starts to cover more data. In the longer term, it needs to be the repository of facts and the narrative of the business. We are commoditizing the base layers of the stack, and there is eventually going to be no fundamental differences between infrastructure. So interesting. We'll see how fast this future comes to life.
Well, I think part of a lot of the conversations we'll see, again, predicting on what data catalogs, and I mean, obviously we're biased, that's our area, but I think we'll see me more on the data products. I think the metadata. I think the other part is like the knowledge coming in more at the forefront, at the center of this.
Yeah.
So.
And LLMs being a really different user experience, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer search and browse only, right? It's really, I want to have a conversation with a trusted advisor.
And I think it's just going to be in every single kind of feature, task, problem solving. The LLMs, the AI will just be just an enhancer to everything. It'll just be all over the place. Eventually we'll take it for granted very, very soon.
Agreed.
All right. Next episode we're talking about table formats with Vinod Chandar. And so we started off kind of, I love how this episode was really going over a history. All right. I love so first of all, what is all the buzz with the table formats? It's like, hey, the companies, it's like, it's my data. I want to leave it alone in my cloud storage bucket, and I want to move it to the next cool query engine. Like that's the ultimate goal. And I love how this is a great episode to understand really the history. We started talking about like originally the storage was really tied together with compute and relational databases. So you had OLTP, OLAP systems, like this is all tied together. There were 3 decades of this. In the early 2000s, recommendation systems and social networks are the ones who started to see that separation of the storage and compute. Then cloud data warehouses separated the storage of the compute, really, but they had these proprietary formats. So you separated this, but you can only do that separation and only work with one particular vendor. And these table formats are sent away such that you can not only just keep that separation, but that you can now actually say, hey, I want your compute, Snowflake or Databricks or Azure, whatever, to work on my data, where I'm stored, wherever I'm being stored. So that is like the big buzz around this stuff. And at the end of the day, I like how we go up that stack and we're saying, look, you have that the storage formats, but then the storage formats also have, guess what? A lot of metadata, right? Again, metadata is all over the place. And that's why you're starting to go see even the different cloud data providers, right? The Databricks and Snowflake and so forth, they have their own meta stores, right? Like Unity and Polaris, where they're actually just keeping track and managing all that metadata, those file formats, so you can better do things on how to go right and optimize. And then you start kind of going up that stack when it comes to metadata. I have operational catalogs and business catalogs, right? So you have all these operational catalogs for the table formats, the Parquet structures. And then you're going into more of the business catalog, right? I want to be able to do discovery and find my data and my data sets, and then goes up into your data products and they have access control and so forth. So you're going up the stack. And what we agreed on is like large organization enterprises, like they're going to need the catalog is going to be part of those data cloud providers. They'll need your Unity catalogs and so forth, but that's for your very technical management of that metadata. And you'll still need other catalogs to go manage more of that operational and business side. So this is a great episode to go into. Really want to demystify what's going on with the table formats and go geek out on a little bit of the history of this stuff. Listen to this episode.
Yeah, a lot of interesting technology choices in this area, and it's great to hear his perspective around all that. All right, next episode. So this was an awesome one. I'm so glad that we could have him on as a guest. Ethan Malik, who's the associate professor at Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. He's been doing a ton of amazing research, talks, and writing on artificial intelligence effect on work, entrepreneurship, and education. Make sure you're following him if you're not already. He's also done a bunch of podcasts out there. So we were truly, truly honored to have him on our show. And he had so many insights. Like we won't be able to even do it justice in this. So like if you haven't listened to that episode, please do. But just to hit a few highlights, we asked him, hey, honest no BS, how do we have agency around AI? And he said, look, people see AI being done to them, but it's just a software process. All right. AI companies are using it to build code. You can use it yourself to do whatever you want, right? So like, just like you have choice, you decide how you want to leverage it, right? A consumer has a huge amount of power. You get electricity to your house, but you decide how you want to use that electricity. Same with organizations. Organizations get to choose. So he's a big believer in agency. AI is not being done to us. It is a new tool which we can leverage, right? And he says you got to go through a process that goes through experimentation on the way to productization. People are trying too hard to jump straight to like incorporate it into your product or like leverage it as a product. Experiment, then do disciplined experimentation, then do research and development, then do innovation, then try to build it into a product, right? So he's really saying you got to iterate, you got to experiment. Most companies are trying to jump straight from like kind of not doing AI for anything, which he said is like 80% of the market right now, to this first phase, which is like a co-pilot. And he said that's kind of boring. Like, really, we should kind of jump straight to phase two, which is like getting real value, right? Which is tapping into the creativity of AI. Like, is it like using it as an advisor, a less constrained system? We need to be way more imaginative with how we're using AI. We're trying so hard to make it dumb by putting it on all these rails and constraining it. When you do that, all of the most exciting things about AI get washed out. You're like kind of drowning it in boringness, right? We have to let it be creative and embrace that as a feature, not a bug. Hallucinations is almost a feature, not a bug,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
He said that I don't think there's a bubble right here. Because we asked him a little bit about like, is this all going to burst, right? Kind of like how the web had the .com boom and bust and things like that. And he's like, no, like there was an economic situation with the web. This is different. This is so much more fundamental and more productivity oriented that the AI change is happening. So I thought that was interesting where he really thinks that like there's not going to be a bubble and a burst here. It's just, continued progress. We asked him about what are his concerns about AI. He said that, well, of course I have a ton of concerns, right? Every webcam now is potentially Big Brother, right? Deep fakes, what's going on in schools, right? Bullying can increase, bad actors, IT security, cybersecurity is going to be one of the most incredible and difficult areas right now. Regulations, good and bad actors, amateurs that don't know if it's good or bad. So ignorance is going to be a problem, right? But these are issues that we'll have to overcome, right? We just have to work on it. We have to overcome them. But there's so much exciting stuff, right? The insights, like this is smarter than a team of PhD scientists working together for free, right? So it's pretty incredible and crazy. What is the first RAG system though? Like if you want to start getting more into RAG applications and things,
Copy paste.
Control C and Control V, or for the Mac users out there, Command C and Command V. So great, excuse me, great advice. Think about information in new ways, he said, right? Look at your organization and you say things like, oh, we have lots of data. What does that even mean you have lots of data, right? What is the special and unique canonical knowledge that your organization has that nobody else has? That's the interesting data. That's the stuff you should be feeding your AI, right? Last but not least, his advice, use AI. Like if you haven't used AI for at least Gen AI specifically for at least 10 hours, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Get your hands on it.
And one of the important takeaways for me was we are trained to make dumb systems smarter, but we don't know how to make smart systems smarter. And I think then we go back and then we end up making smart systems dumber. So I think that's like we got to really think outside of our box and get out of our just get out of like our known way of doing things. So
yep.
All right, we're heading close. So episode 14 was with Nicola Askham about data governance.
Great episode.
And I love this. She said, like, when we walk into the office and we see a hole in the wall, do we just move the paint in and cover it? Or do we actually call facilities and say, there's a problem here, there's something to fix, right? I mean, that for me, like the best analogy ever. And I'm like, yeah. And what do a lot of people do? They're like, you're just little moving like a painting all over the places, right?
Oh, we got some data quality issue or something, right?
So, okay, data governance, you can't just outsource it. Your company is the best position to understand those challenges and what needs to happen. And so we already know that kind of governance started more of that regulation focus. But I think one of the things we discussed is that if you're only doing it for regulation, that's it. Like that's not enough. You got to start doing more. And this is an honest OBS, and I love this stuff because we're a vendor, but I even bring this up is like, you know what you should start doing data governance first with in a spreadsheet. Like that really needs to be your first starting point.
Yeah, you could start with a spreadsheet. You said.
How do you start? Several different things, but two things that caught my attention. One is do conceptual modeling for each business unit to understand them. Like literally just go talk to people and like get in front of the whiteboard and try to understand these things. Like that is trying to understand the business. Again, this is understanding knowledge. And the second one is share data quality horror stories, right? And use that to drive alignment and urgency. So I think we always like try to talk about the great things that are happening. We should also talk about the bad things that happen and use it as an opportunity. Other things, and I love that we discussed a lot about what you should not be doing. You should not have consultants come in and do the governance for you. You cannot be outsourced. You can't outsource that. What worked in one organization may not work in another one. There is no copy and paste framework. There is no silver bullet around this, right? Like I said, doing data governance for regulations, doing the minimal work, just checking the boxes, regulators will change their mind. Just do it properly and you will address not only the regulators, but you can also provide the business value. You should not just put it on a short timeline. You should not think about it as a project. This is a very specific people who are getting on board with data governance. Like there's a reason why she's called a data governance coach. So again, another topic I feel that now we are taking data governance out of the naysayers. People are like, no, this is the way how we're actually going to be those enablers. Tie all this data governance. I would highly recommend listen to this data governance episode and then listen to the library science episodes, and you're like going to see all these dots connect.
Nice. So I think that brings us to our second to last episode, right? Because our last one was at DGIQ. I guess the last one before that one, right?
Yeah. So this is the
last sort of official episode with a guest, right? Is with Ole, right? Where we talked about MetaGrid. And, this has been a topic that he's been pushing a little bit more lately on LinkedIn. Obviously, I think it's incorporated into his book that is around the fundamentals of metadata management, which is going to be coming out in the very near future. And he previously wrote Enterprise Data Catalog, right? The MetaGrid is something people are asking a lot of questions about, like why are we creating a new term? Like what's going on here? Like, and can you explain it to us, right? And I know he's still kind of working on exactly the definition that he wants to put around it, but we want to unpack it with folks and understand like why he's saying what he's saying and why it's important. And he said that what is MetaGrid, right? Honest OBS, what is MetaGrid? He said it's the set of decision records architected on how to define certain things in the IT landscape in certain repositories and how these things change over time and move into other repositories for different capabilities. It's a little bit of a long definition. So we spent probably the next 10 or 15 minutes being like, okay, let's unpack that. Let's kind of explain what this means here. And what we really boiled it down to was that metadata is not about what it is, it's about where it is. And it is in two places at once. It is the context and critical information that lives within the system that it lives within, but it is also living separate in a repository where it can be shared and discoverable and interoperable and active.
And the analogy, not the analogy, the reality is like you take a book, and in that book, inside the book, there's metadata, right? Who's the publisher? Who's the author?
Yeah, you open up the book and it says, hey, copyright 1987. Right?
And then that
you don't have to copy that and stick it into a separate database and turn it into metadata. It is metadata.
And then somewhere else that exists, it's indexed, so you can go use that metadata to go search and find it. You go to Amazon and then you go find that book. So there's that metadata over there. So that's a great way of thinking about that.
Yep, exactly. And he talked about the team topology structure and how that's really important. And I love team topology. For those of you who don't know much about team topology, Google it, check it out. Like there's some books. I love their book around product teams and how you should structure product teams. Team topology, great sort of methodology around teams and structures and decentralization, scalability. Teams doing work don't always know about other teams that may be doing similar work. And so you have to make sure that you're communicating and coordinating. And that's the same thing with metadata, right? You have all these different systems. They have metadata. That metadata should be shared. And sometimes we don't even realize that certain systems are metadata. For example, right? you probably have Jira in your organization or ServiceNow in your organization. You may not think of that as metadata, but actually it is metadata, right? The status of these workflows is metadata, and it's something that is interoperable. You have probably using something like Datadog or some kind of a monitoring, infrastructure monitoring. That's metadata, right? So he's taking a very expansive view, and he talked about what we call the unconscious metagrid, which is like we have implemented these technologies, but it wasn't done in a conscious way. It kind of was organic, right? We didn't really think about metadata as a first-class citizen. It's not well aligned. It isn't. There is a lack of trust. People don't understand. And I think what was really interesting was that we were trying to kind of convince him to go into a technology direction and kind of turn it into more of a like, well, what if you want to build a meta grid? Like, how do you build a meta grid kind of thing? He's like, no, like you kind of shut us down. He's like, no, like I just want people to realize that like all these systems are metadata, right? And they have metadata and they need to be interoperable and be able to be connected together. And if we can just achieve that understanding and that appreciation, switch from unconscious to conscious, that's good enough. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Do you have any other takeaways?
I think kind of like this is the one to wrap up right now. One thing that you brought this up is that this shouldn't scale. Because I think somebody asked, like, how do you scale this stuff? And and he brought up the idea, kind of thinking about the teams is like you need to have like some sort of a reference librarian. You go to a library, you ask the reference librarian. I'm trying to go. His analogy was like, what is the average corn production in Arkansas in 1935? Right. Well, there was probably not one place where you're going to find that. So you probably need to go bring in this one book and another book, and the librarian will be able to like, okay, it's over here. Here's the stuff together. Let's go either go find it yourself or let's go do it together. Right. And I think that's the type of stuff that we need to get to. And guess what? You don't need to be able to go know everything to answer every possible question. That's why you may not need to go scale.
He said the point of the metagrid is to build something solid, to build a fortress, right? And then we said, well, that doesn't sound very scalable. What do you say to somebody who says, well, maybe that's not very agile? He said that there is a lot you can't do with agility. I just thought that was interesting.
So just to wrap this up, I'm like you take this topic of the metagrid, right, which is about like understanding how things are being connected. There and then Ole is a he's a librarian, right? That's his education. Listen to that episode. Listen to the episode with Amalia, right, which is on library sciences. Listen to just like the stuff we talked about, data governance, which is also kind of about the people structures and I mean, there's figuring out what to go do first and so forth. That's around governance. Then that other episode about the active metadata, because even like that point, I'm just right now connecting the dots. Is like one of those takeaways from Mike Evans was, when you're onboarding new vendors, like you should ask about how they're getting their metadata, because you should be thinking about this stuff, because that tool over there is going to export some data, or which is Pump versus data, somebody else's metadata. It's going to go some other tool. Like you want to be able to go understand and document these things. So yeah, I think it's all about understanding these relationships, understanding the people. There's all these kind of frameworks, enablements of governing to make sure this stuff works. I mean, 4 or 5 years now doing this stuff, I think what I'm realizing is that without even realizing ourselves, we are making all these unconscious connections that I'm like zooming out like, oh my God, like this is making more and more sense about how organizations really need to be, how we can operate better. And I think we just kind of, even just looking at how we've done the podcast for now 4 or 5 years, because of how we're now more online building these communities. There's the data community on LinkedIn is freaking amazing. We're sharing more things. Like what we're sharing today is way more than what we were sharing 5 years ago. And I just feel that now, because we're having all these conversations, I truly feel much more I'm always been optimistic, but I'm just really excited about that we're going to actually open up and really solve these problems that we've just been complaining and bitching about for so long. I genuinely believe that in the next couple of years, we're going to just thrive more and just actually be happier and have less complaints around some stuff. And I know people's like, oh, our dashboard's broken. Like, yeah, that shit happens all the time. And like, we're going to start celebrating more of like this shit's working well. And like, and how do I make the stuff that's working well, make it even better and stuff. So
I hope you're right, Juan.
I hope I'm right too, because I will acknowledge many times I'm like, fuck this shit.
Because the honest no BS might be that the CEO and the board are going to ask us to implement Gen AI for the next 3 years, and it's going to be annoying and sucky. but then eventually we'll come out the other side. So
All right.
I similar to you, I'm very hopeful that we're moving in the right direction here. And you know what's interesting is that in all these topics we talk about technology, and we're a technology podcast, right? But people, process, strategy, change management, like these are things that come up over and over again, not because we're trying, but because they're inherent.
Yes.
The world of data is a world of people.
And that if there is one theme out of all the 200 plus podcast episodes we've done, it's people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hey,
with that,
everyone. We've
cheers.
had so much fun being able to bring these awesome guests to you over this season here. Ping us we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. Tim.Gasper at Data.World, Juan at Data.World. I gotta get a first name alias, by the way. I don't think I've set that up.
I don't know what you don't have. But
I should be Tim at Data.World. Anyways,
right.
we love being able to talk with you all, to build community with you all, and what should we be talking about as we go into the next season here?
Yeah,
Let us know.
Let us know. We'll see you all. Have a great. We're gonna take a break for a couple weeks. We'll figure out when we're gonna start off again, and then our first event will be at Day-to-Day Texas.
Yeah.
So we'll be there.
Day-to-Day Texas should be fun.
There
Oh
we
yeah,
go.
we have there's a
Use
discount
the
code, right?
Honest No BS for a discount.
Honest No BS. Hang out with us in Austin over at Day-to-Day Texas. Happy holidays, and